Next is SCCP integration. So for SCCP integration, again, we have CUCM and we have Unity connection. In CUCM side, now you can see a little more steps are added here. So it's a little more complex than SIP integration. In SCCP integration, along with voicemail pilot and voicemail profile, we have these. So instead of route pattern, in SIP integration, we saw that we had to configure VM profile, we had to configure VM pilot, we had to configure route pattern and SIP trunk. Instead of route pattern, in case of SCCP integration, we configure hunt pilot, hunt list, and line group. Okay. And then we also have to configure MWI, message waiting indicator. It has to be configured on both Unity connection and CUCM. Okay. So this will allow the users to receive the notifications on and off. So both on configuration and off configuration has to be done. So then CUC has kind of similar it's like the same to call the CUC. So you configure a number, let's say 1000. You configure this number to call CUC. It's like the identity of CUC, like a DN number for phones. How you call phones, they need some number for that, right? Similarly, CUCM to communicate to CUC, it needs some number, right? In collaboration.
We used to use a hunt pilot, one number as the face of the organization.
Correct. Right.
And then in there, you'd have what do you call them? Like a list.
Right.
Yeah. Which you could drop that call before we had a contact center. You get it? Yeah. So I can tell you one number.
One number. Right.
Then you have numbers in there that when you call that one number, it will look for the free number.
Correct. That's right. And it uses round robin in this case.
Exactly.
Yeah. SIP uses top-down method. So whatever is free first, it will go there. And SCCP uses round robin. It will reach the first free port, and then the next, and then the next, like this. Okay. So these are the configuration we do on the CUCM. And on Cisco Unity connection, it's quite similar. We have phone system, CUCM, port groups, ports. Just addition to that, we have to configure MWI. So this is an addition in SCCP configuration on both the ends. Right? Voicemail pilot wizard in CUCM automatically generates the voicemail ports and put the ports into line group. So what happens is when you create this profile, it automatically generates a line group, and in that line group, the port numbers are combined. But these hunt pilot, hunt list, line group, hunt pilot and hunt list, these have to be manually configured. These you have to manually configure as per our requirement. We can configure any number. SCCP integration uses TCP port 2000 for regular communication, unsecure, and port number 2443 for secure communication. Right? So these are the two port numbers used in SCCP. So when you integrate CUCM with Unity connection via SCCP, use the voicemail port wizard in CUCM administration. The voicemail port wizard asks for parameters such as number of voicemail ports. It automatically generates the voicemail ports and put the ports into the line group. The hunt list and hunt pilot are configured manually. For the voicemail profile and voicemail pilot, use and modify the default entries. So what happens in CUCM, we already have, or in CUC, you have already some default fields configured, like in case of phone system. In CUCM, we have voicemail profile, we have voicemail pilot. These are default created. Yeah, we can add new ones, but we have default created. We can modify those as well. right? So we can use, so that saves some time. Some default configuration is already there, which we do not want to change. So we can use the same default ones created and modify those entries that exist. In this integration also, it works the same way from the user perspective. It will press the messages button on the IP phone, and the CUCM will then look for voicemail profile associated with the phone line and takes the voicemail pilot number that you have created from profile and search for hunt pilot here. So like we were saying in the SIP integration, same way here, hunt pilot, it will look for that has that number, and then it will, the hunt pilot will look for the hunt list, which will look for the line group. So it will go in this order. The configuration is done in the order, in the reverse order, up top to down. And the processing is done in the opposite order, from bottom to up. Okay. The voicemail ports are then used as defined in the line group parameters distribution mechanism, for example, round robin. So like he said that it reaches the ports under the hunt pilot. So it goes in the round robin fashion. You must configure MWI. This is one requirement that we need to know for SCCP, that MWI has to be configured on both the ends, MWI on and MWI off, with which the users will be able to receive the notification and will be able to do both. Once a message is received and it's unread, any voicemail received and is unread, the user should be able to notify it. So to get notified, NW on is configured. And once he has retrieved the message, seen the message, the message waiting indicator should turn off, right? So we have MWI off. And to enable that also, we have to define a number for these. So for example, 1001 and 1002. And you create this as MWI on and MWI off. Right? We need both of these to work.
So I don't know. Must be even to go.
This one taken.
That's smaller.
Okay, so I know what that was on Nagamba. This one is also that actually I can't see 03105. Only seeing 04105. I don't know. That must be, I think, on the account numbers.
He's not seeing
It's the branch code, I think, 03105.
He's seeing 1
04105.
That is the. That is Boga. It's Boga. He's bringing damage to Boga. So. Damage to Boga.
That's the second one. Yes.
Okay, so in SIP integration, MWI on and off are configured with the same number on both the sides. So if I have configured MWI,
You said MWI is what?
message waiting indicator. So it's just a notification.
The W is what?
Waiting.
Yeah. That's not actually.
It has to be put together. The off has to be manually off.
Right. And it has to be configured in SCCP for both CUCM and CUC. Yeah, and the number should match, same. If you configure different number, yeah. Should be same number, right? So
Yes, it was over there.
Correct. Yeah. If it is wrong, then the message waiting indicator will not enable.
That's true. I'm not familiar with this. We did this, we did a setup.
Hey,
Yeah.
prior to this.
Yeah, right. It's because the phone when it's not there. We did it. Yeah. So I'm very,
So that
Oh,
was
nice.
2000. I remember when we used to configure those manual on the router as a voice problem, we were saying DNs. We used to get somewhere 42,000 somewhere. I pay something like 42,000. So that's the point we used to call it.
Yeah.
But I know that in our environment we used to currently.
Secure one. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to focus. Yeah.
It's just the same SCCP but secure port. It's
Yeah.
like HTTP and HTTPS.
Yes.
It's just that. No worry, you skipped it in the office. Now you will do the lab
Yeah.
here. We have a lab in which you will see how to configure this MWI and everything from the integration that we are talking about. Okay, so for this integration, 2000 as a standard port and secure port 2443 is used between IP phone and Unity connection. Now, let's talk about some typical integration mistakes. So we have talked about what is the integration configuration to be done for SCCP and SIP. Now let's see some common mistakes that are done, like calls to Cisco Unity connection are failing due to phone system settings. So on Unity connection, this is phone system setting. Sometimes if that is wrong, your calls to the Cisco Unity connection will not be reachable. Right, so from CUCM, it will not be able to reach CUC if your phone system settings are not correct, if your routing rules are not correct. Right? So these are some common mistakes that happen sometimes. Ports are failing to register. So the ports like MWI ports or the ports that you have defined for sessions, how many sessions you want, right? So if that is not configured correctly, then one of the common mistake we make is device name prefix. We will see in the configuration that we configure a device name prefix, which has to be the same on both the ends. So for example, I configure a device name prefix CUCM, CUC, like this to integrate CUCM to CUC. This is the name I have used as a prefix on CUCM. So the same prefix has to be used on CUC. It's just that after this, we use an extension like VI. Okay, with in CUC end, this is the prefix. Right? Yeah, so we have to make sure that the device prefix name that we have configured is correct and it matches on both ends, right? And it's case sensitive. Then MWI problems. So like I said, if you configure wrong, mismatched MWIs, then it won't work and there can be many problems. If MWI is not enabled for voicemail ports, right? So you have, let's say you have created the MWI ports, but you have not enabled them. So that is one of the common mistakes. Voicemail ports for MWI are too busy, right? So you have created the ports, but they are not enough for the number of sessions, right? Incorrect MWI extensions like 1001 on CUC and 1002 on CUCM, right? MWI is disabled for the user. So if MWI is created but not enabled, so then MWI problem will be there. Incorrect phone system. CSS issues. So on CUCM, when you have CSS configured, calling search space, which is for security purpose to allow only a set of users to be able to call to the CUC. So if that is incorrectly configured, that can be an issue, right? So you have configured the ports, but you have not allowed the users in the CSS. Right? Dial plan overlap. So these are some common mistakes that happen. So these are this. So by just knowing this, you know, in troubleshooting that these are the main areas where the problem can be. Then integration consideration. To secure Cisco Unity connection, you have to properly configure MWI handling and prevent toll fraud. This is in terms of security. Okay, so now because any user, when you are allowing any port for Unity connection to be called, let's say you have configured a number 18100 as a CUC voicemail number. From CUCM might have many users registered to it, right? Many users in the local network and in the branch offices registered on the same CUCM. You do not want all the users to be able to call CUC, right? Only a specific set of users, right? So for that, we have to prevent stall fraud, because this is one type of attack and security threat in case of Unity connection, that a user can forward calls to CUC, right? To Unity connection. So we have MWI, message waiting indicator. We have class of service and security. These are three integration considerations that have to be properly configured, right? The extension that is configured in Unity connection can be 4-digit. You can configure a 4-digit MWI, or it can be E.164 standard. It can be 8-digit. E.164 basically means a standard which gives the format for national numbers, local numbers, international numbers. Yeah. So for each, we have a set of rules like national number, 10-digit, local 8-digit, international 12 digits, right? So either we can use this format, or a 4-digit format, which is a standard approach within the internal network, right, for MWI. And it should equal the dialed number in CUCM. So this means the same thing, that you have to configure the same number on both the sides. The MWI is sent only to the configured extension in Unity connection, not to alternate extension. So that's why it needs to be seen. The CSS on the voice port or SIP trunk should be restricted. CSS it's like a lock you're applying. So you are creating a partition and you are giving a CSS. You're creating partition and CSS using class of service. So partitions in CSS are also used for security purpose, to allow only a set of users to be able to make calls to a group of numbers or a number. And then on the CUC end, for security, we have restriction tables. So for example, when there is a user connected to this CUC voicemail user, he is going on a vacation and he wants whatever calls are coming to my number, my office number, should get forwarded to me on my personal phone. So what a user can do is, the users have the capability to just use their profile to go into their profile and forward the calls to their personal number, to their personal phone. So what will happen is, if let's say I'm going on a vacation to Maldives, and I give my relatives my phone number, which is my office phone number, which is connected to CUC, and my mobile phone is registered along with that. So whatever calls I will receive on my office phone, I will be able to receive on my phone. So my relatives will only be charged for the local call, but the office will be charged for the international call, which I'm receiving as it is forwarded from the office. So that is called toll fraud. Yeah, that can be done by an internal user or external users by forwarding the calls from outside, right? So to prevent such things, such attacks, it can affect the high cost and traffic, bandwidth consumption, resource consumption. To avoid that, we have some ways to prevent this toll fraud technique. So in the Unity connection, it can be done by the administrator only, because the Unity connection is to be managed by the administrator. He can only do the configuration there, not the end users, right? So the administrator can create a restriction table rules. So there is a default restriction table in Unity connection in which you define some rules that only these numbers are allowed, and forwarding calls are allowed for this particular numbers, like extension within the network, not outside of the network. So you can forward your voicemails or calls to on internal numbers only. Yeah, so that can be done using restriction table. So this is to prevent such type of fraud or toll fraud. And on the CUCN end, we have CSS.
No, that's not exactly that. Yeah, you only allow them forwarding calls or any types of messages restricted to strictly within the office numbers.
That's right.
For
Yeah.
port forwarding.
Eh?
For port forwarding.
Yes, you cannot forward to your mobile phone.
Yeah. Otherwise, if you're connected to PST and you have a
Yes.
line to internal, let's say international numbers and national numbers, it is possible. But
It's possible.
yeah,
But even us,
right,
time,
right.
we didn't.
So you have to make that setting in restriction table that should not be forwarded to these numbers, only the internal extensions. Yeah. So that is to prevent toll fraud. So this is a security configuration. Then harden the pins and use the lockout mechanisms. So harden the pins means use even the internal users, they are asked to enter a pin whenever they used to communicate to the Unity connection. So they are asked to enter a pin and then make a call. Not anyone can make a call, right? And lockout mechanism, like if you enter 3 incorrect pins, your account would be locked. Then only the administrator can unlock it, right? So these are some considerations for security perspective that must be implemented, right? So when authentication is used, LDAP security policies are applied. LDAP can be used for username, passwords, right? Okay, then some clustering options. So in Unity Connection, we have a publisher and a subscriber. Unity Connection supports high availability and disaster recovery are the 2 primary customer requirements for preserving voicemail services if there is a Unity Connection system outage or disaster. So we have 1:1 ratio of cluster, publisher and subscriber. A maximum of 2 servers are supported. Only one server gives you how many? I discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Maximum
For the
20,000 users.
Yes.
20,000 users.
What's that? 250, right?
250, that's right. And if you add one subscriber to it, the number of users or the voicemails supported is still 2,000. Yeah, 20,000, but the ports gets doubled, right? Yeah. One server is designated as publisher, other as subscriber or secondary server. You can load balance and balance calls and clients in Unity Connection. This is another difference in this cluster other than CUCM. In CUCM, the nodes do not load balance. It's just primary, secondary, tertiary like this. Here, you both are active at a time. So it's an active pair. So it's not that only publisher is active at a time, and if publisher goes down, then only subscriber will take over. No, what will happen? Both will be active, and the calls will be load balanced. The traffic will be load balanced between these. So both will be working, load balancing, right? If publisher goes down, only the port numbers will reduce. Yeah, from 500 to 250 it will become. Okay, so CUC supports 2 server active high availability solution to provide high availability and redundancy for voice messaging within a LAN site. One Cisco Unity Connection server is designated as publisher, other as subscriber. The database is shared and synchronized between the servers. So like in CUCM, we talked about the data replication. Same way in Unity Connection also, there is data replication. And publisher is still the administrative phase of the cluster. So the configurations are made in the publisher, and from there it gets replicated to the subscriber. If one of the server fails the Unity Connection cluster, the user can still retrieve the messages because there is subscriber that takes over. Balancing the Cisco Unity Connection call load. So as both are active, there is load balancing. So that is how it performs load balancing. When integrating CUC with CUCM by SCCP, it is possible to balance the voice traffic that the Unity Connection server pair manages. In Unity Connection, all the ports are in a single port group. In a cluster, so if you have only one publisher, let's say in Unity Connection, so the ports, when we configure to enable the number of sessions, it is defined in one port group, right? But when you have a publisher and subscriber, then half of the ports are assigned to one server and half of the ports to the other server, right? That is basically to load balance. So first half of the answering ports and dial out ports are assigned to publisher and remaining to the subscriber. When integrating CUCM using SIP trunk, it is possible to balance the voice traffic that the cluster pair manages using one of the following methods. So you use a route list, DNS, and SIP gateway. These are the configurations done using SIP trunk. So for load balancing, we can use route list. So we can create a route list for publisher, one for subscriber. And on the DNS server, we can create a record for both publisher and subscriber, right? So let me show you what. On SIP integration, as we just discussed, on publisher and subscriber, first half of the ports are assigned on the publisher and second half to the subscriber. If you are using just one, then you will have only one port group by default, which is divided in case of two servers. Okay. Then in SIP integration, when you have CUCM, you have to configure a route list for load balancing, right? So there is route list and DNS server. Now DNS server, what happens is when CUC has a publisher and subscriber, on publisher, you have an IP 10.1.1.1. On the server also, for high availability, you give the same IP 10.1.1.1, which is a logical number, logical IP, not physical. Physically, it is not possible to have the same IPs on both, but as a logical IP, we can configure that. This is called virtual IP, right? And as these virtual IPs are the same, the DNS will resolve the names, let's say CUC pub and CUC sub, both to the same IP. So whenever a client sends a request, the DNS will send that request to both, right? Because the names are different, but the IP, when it gets resolved, is the same for both. So it is sent to both, right? So these are some ways we can perform load balancing. So here you can see when a client is sending a request, the request first goes to the DNS server, and the DNS server do its lookup called DNS A record. After doing the lookup, it will send a response, and by getting the response, it knows that this is configured on two of the servers. So the request goes two ways, to the publisher and the subscriber, right? So the DNS record it used for this resolvement is A record. Then some deployment options. So three main deployment options are there to deploy Unity Connection. We have single site deployment, centralized multi-site deployment, and decentralized multi-site deployment. So when you can have a CUCM on one side, Unity Connection on the other, or you can have both at one side or both at both the sites, right? So based on that, we have different deployments. Single site deployment is where both your CUCM and Unity Connection are at the same site, single site. So all the users within your network are getting voicemail services and call processing, everything from the same LAN. That is single site deployment. Yeah. Whereas in multi-site deployment, in centralized multi-site deployment, you might have a CUCM on one site, Unity Connection on the other. Right. So for this headquarter, if we see for headquarter, we have some end devices for which we have Unity Connection. In the same LAN, we have CUCM also. But for the branch, we see here on the branch, we have some users for which we have a Unity Connection, but not CUCM. They are getting the registered to CUCM, which is here in the headquarters. So if it has, let's say, some other branches also, and on that branch also it has voicemail server, but Unity Connection is still the same. It's just the headquarters. It's like hub and spoke, right? So that is the type of deployment is called centralized deployment, right? So your management server, your communication manager remains on one site, your headquarters, right? And on the branches, you can have just Unity Connection. Next is decentralized multi-site deployment. Now, in decentralized multi-site deployment, they are independent of the other site. So each site has its own CUCM and Unity Connection both. So in the headquarter, it has its CUCM. it has its Unity Connection cluster, publisher and subscriber both. Same way on the branch, it has CUCN. It has its publisher and subscriber cluster of Unity Connection. So decentralized multi-site deployment are independent for both voicemail services and unified communication services, right? So they have their own, but for integration between these two sites, they might have some WAN connection or PSTN, right? So that is called decentralized multi-site deployment. Next is networking. So in voice message networking, the systems are networked together to present a single messages system to both inside and outside users. Different types of networkings are used in case of Cisco Unity Connection. It supports legacy networking. As the name already says, it's not used anymore. It's a legacy now. HTTPS networking and VPIM, voice profile for internet mail. These are the three types of networking between these systems. So legacy networking provides intra-site and inter-site networking. In intra-site networking, 10 clusters, maximum of 10 clusters can be networked together. 10 clusters of Unity connection. It uses SMTP transport for both directory application and message transport, right? As we're talking about voicemail. Inter-site communication, you can add inter-site link to increase network capacity to maximum of 20 Unity connection servers, right? Then in HTTPS, this is more scalable. Legacy is not used anymore. We have HTTPS, which is more scalable deployment as compared to legacy networking in terms of number of locations. So more than 2 locations, and legacy only 2 locations were allowed in either inter-site communication or intra-site communication only. Here, more than 2 locations can be networked together. VPIM is industry standard protocol for messaging between different versions of Unity connection servers. So it also, VPIM is a networking which is used for multi-vendor servers, not just Cisco, and other VPIM compatible voice messaging systems, other vendors. It supports up to 100 VPIM locations. Very large. Yeah. Okay, so that is it about the